Hello there, Submarine fans. It's Ryle from TheSubVet.com. In a moment, we'll be bringing our special guest, Lieutenant Commander David Anderson, USN retired for TSV Podcast-002. If you've recently found us by this video or podcast, you can find us and more information about our mission on the web at TheSubVet.com. We also have a free daily news service where we post all daily news related to the world of submarines in all respects. You can join us on our Facebook group by searching for the SubVet and simply answering a few questions to verify your subscription. And if you prefer Twitter, find us simply at the SubVet and subscribe there as well. The SubVet is a user and viewer supported service including this broadcast. Although these services and broadcasts are free, donations are appreciated and can be made through PayPal at our donation section on TheSubVet.com. Now to introduce tonight's guest. David enlisted in the Navy August 1987 to become an electrician's mate at 20 years old after spending some time in college. He completed A school and was in the Nuclear Power School Class 8805. He did his prototype in Idaho Falls, Idaho on the S5G plant. Upon graduating, he was selected to go to special projects requiring a top secret clearance for the entire command to be transferred to the USS Parche SSN 683, which was undergoing a conversion and overhaul. More about that in a little bit. After making first class petty officer, he re-enlisted for orders to teach at Orlando, Florida Nuclear Pipeline A School in 1993. During his tour, David was picked up for the enlisted commissioning program to get his commission as an officer. Although he did love teaching young EM3s out of boot camp. If this wasn't even enough, he also attained his Master Training Specialist designation. He returned to North Carolina to attend North Carolina State University with the intentions to get a degree in nuclear engineering. But due to Navy age restrictions about being commissioned before your 31st birthday, David changed his degree to a BA in Political Science and Criminal Justice in 1997, graduating magna cum laude and commissioned as an ensign in the United States Navy. He was required to go back through the Nuclear Power School pipeline again as a junior officer, going through Orlando for Power School, prototype in Charleston, South Carolina, and then a junior officer through sub school. David has served on the following submarines: USS Parche SSN 683, USS Wyoming SSBN 742 Blue, which he did 5 patrols as the MPA, the DCA, and the Como, and USS Greenville SSN 772 as the navigator. He finished his career at ComSubPac and retired on April 30th, 2010 as a lieutenant commander in the United States Navy. He is a book author and also an online vendor of various submarine memorabilia, including challenge coins. He was previously married and has 3 children, Olivia, Oliver, and Annalise. But now he is currently married to his wife, Tracy Anderson, who also has 2 children, Colby, who is unfortunately now deceased, and Ryle. Tracy and Dave had recently had to deal with a tragedy together about Tracy's son, Colby, who was killed in a DUI accident as a passenger in February 2018. David has self-published 2 Tom Clancy-type submarine-related military fiction books and has donated all the proceeds to their nonprofit organization, the Colby Haithcock Memorial Scholarship Fund. Lieutenant Commander David Anderson, welcome to TheSubVet.com. What say you?
Outstanding. Thanks for having me, Eric, and I appreciate the time on the subvet.com. I'm really looking forward to sharing my story, talking about, my career, the great people that I served 23 years with, talking about, post Navy career transitioning out of the submarine force into the civilian world, how I got into writing books, how we ended up creating our charity after Tracy's son died in 2018, and what led me into doing the memorabilia, coins and shirts and things like that. And if you notice, I got one of my Parchy shirts on, kind of a shout out to
Yes,
one of
I
the
do
best
see that.
crews
That's a
out
great
there.
shirt.
So thanks for having me.
So we might have a lot to talk about tonight. So there could be a part two if you want to do it. We can do that. That'd
Love
be just
love
fine.
to do it. That's correct. Love to do it.
Okay, if you could tell me a little bit about what made you choose to go into the Navy. I mean, you were going through college a little bit. Don't know what degree program you're pursuing. What
Right.
happened made you change your mind to go to the Navy?
So my high school made everybody take the ASVAB your junior year. Scored high enough that Navy recruiters pretty much started calling the house and wanted me to go into the nuke field program. At 18, you're kind of hard headed, didn't really want to do that. So I tried college. 3 semesters, a couple of dead cars, wasting the parents' money greatly. Kind of leads you to the point that you have to grow up and become your own adult. And I remembered the conversations with the recruiters from 2 years previous, and um, I'd been in that second accident that totaled my mom's car and stitches in my arm and that kind of thing. I called
Oh
her
no.
and called the recruiter's office the day that they pulled the stitches out of my elbow, and basically told the recruiter that I was coming to the office, I was signing, I was going to go into the nuke field program. He gave me, but you got to test and pass and this, that, and the other. I said, just sign me up. I'm coming in. And I joined the Navy probably about 4 months after that. So it wasn't long. I had to get out of the house and grow up, basically.
So you qualified for the nuclear power program, which is a little bit more difficult. And so you took a separate test from the ASVAB, and you did fairly well on that.
Right. Yeah, that's called the NFQT. I guess it may be something different now, but it's a nuclear field qualifying test. Um, yeah, I did really well. And my goal was to become an electrician's mate. They don't really guarantee you anything coming, you come out of through boot camp, and toward the end of boot camp, they tell you what school you got selected for. And thankfully, I became an electrician. Um, you know, in that pipeline, you got the nuclear machinist mates, you got the nuclear electronics technicians, and the electricians, and it just seemed like that's what I wanted to do. They tell you, well, the mechanics are greasy, oily, dirty. The ETs, their first school was 26 weeks long, where it was only 16 for electricians. It's like I want to be an electrician, and thankfully, that's what I got selected as. And
Kind of like the
went
need for the Navy too, right? Yeah.
That's right. That's right. They try to, uh, as we progress in the story of my career or whatever. When I went back to A school in '93 as an instructor, you build the school pipeline based on trying to balance out all the NFQT scores for the mechanics, the ETs, and the electricians. So I was just fortunate enough to get selected to be an electrician and do what I had planned on doing anyway. So, but I'll be honest with you, 23 years in the Navy, I learned pretty quick that if you really want something, you have to kind of earn it. And I can't tell you that there were very few things in my Navy career that if I wanted it, I didn't get. And you just have to work your way into them. You put in the effort and you'll get the rewards, basically.
Yeah, the Navy's definitely a place. If you're willing to work hard, I mean, you can achieve some major things in the Navy, both
That's right.
enlisted and officer. This brings
Right.
up a good point because we're at that stage in your career. You said you went to Idaho for prototype, and I'm kind of mixing what you've done in the civilian world post career as well. And you're making these challenge coins, and you told me a good story about what happened at Prototype where you had to ride a bus. Can you tell me
Right.
about that?
So when it came time after you got through power school, that's a 6 month school. You're all put in for where you want to go to Prototype. And back then, you had three choices. You could go to Connecticut, you could go to upstate New York and Boston Spa, or you could go to Idaho Falls. Well, my kind of running buddies, we all wanted to go to Windsor, Connecticut together. And as luck would have it, they they were short of people that volunteered to go to Idaho. So they came back to our class and said, we need more people to go to Idaho. And of course, nobody volunteered. And I was the only one out of my group of about six guys that I hung out with that got pulled out of a hat and got sent to Idaho against my will. But I'll be honest with you, the day I drove into Idaho Falls was the day I realized it was the right choice and the right place. And it was beautiful there. And obviously it was kind of late summer, just beginning of winter. It was bitter cold. But in Idaho as a student, you lived in Idaho Falls, but the site was 60 miles outside of
And
town.
this is pretty close to Yellowstone, correct?
Correct. Mm-hmm. So you're out there. So Idaho Falls, Idaho's kind of square on the bottom, and then as you look on the map, the left side kind of goes up, but it's in the lower right-hand corner. So you're close to Wyoming and the other states there, but so students weren't allowed to drive out to the site, so you had to catch a bus, 60 miles one way.
60 miles.
Yeah, it was a ride, and if you were on the bus route at the beginning, you got on a bus an hour and 45 minutes before your shift started. You did 12-hour shifts. You came home. So you basically had enough time to come home, get off the bus, take a shower, sleep, get up and go again, because you work rotating shifts for 7 days. But the challenge coin we were talking about, when I make challenge coins, especially if it's a command that's decommissioned or no longer around, I try to put stuff on them that only the people that were there would remember. And so the back of the Idaho Falls Prototype coin has a bus symbol, and then it says, "Don't miss the bus." Because if you missed the bus and you couldn't drive out, most people, if you missed it, would jump in their car and go out to the last stop out of town hoping to catch it. But if you missed it, you were going to be late. And they only ran buses on like 2-hour cycles. So you'd end up getting in trouble.
So and some instructors are probably pretty upset, huh?
Oh yeah. Well, when you're a junior Navy guy and you show up late for your shift, it's not a good thing for you. I'll put it to you that way. And guys that were habitual ended up getting forced to sleep out at the site. They'd spend 5 days sleeping in the bunkhouse because they couldn't get on the bus on time and stuff like that. But fortunately, that never happened to me. So.
And this is basically a reactor that was shunted to ground, and that's why it was so far out there, 60 miles.
Right. Well, so that area in Idaho at one time had about 100 different operational reactor facilities, not necessarily reactor plants, but you had plants, you had test facilities, you had the expended core facility where all the seagoing submarine surface ships, where they pull their reactors apart and bring back parts of the core to do testing on them to make sure that they operated the way they were designed. And so at end of life, they would check them. And so the expended core facility was out there. So when you went out on the bus, you had ID badges you had to have on. You'd go through a gate that was way outside that whole complex where all those different buildings were. And their security force out there was no joke. I mean, they had helicopters, they had armored personnel carriers. They trained probably once a month to at least once a quarter for like rappel boarders like you do on a ship. But
Did they have a Marine detachment out there or something?
No, they were civilian.
Just all civilian security? Yeah.
Their civilian police force, if you will, traveled to all these like SWAT competitions, and they regularly won. That's how good they were. And so it was a big deal to get out there and to get on site. And if you were asleep on the bus, they would kind of bump you and nudge you, because you had to look up and show them your face and your badge at the same time, so they could match face to badge and make sure you were supposed to come inside the perimeter out there. So
yeah, being a missile technical weapon, same thing. Cape Canaveral, so very serious stuff.
exactly.
So the next stage after prototype, was that when you got orders to the boat? After that,
Yes, yeah, that's so I'd gotten selected to be a staff pickup to stay in Idaho, but
oh,
I'd
that's right.
also
So some students, based on they did, would get picked up for instructors.
right,
Right?
and get to stay there for 2 years. You qualify as an instructor, and you'd help train students and stuff that were coming through. And I wanted to stay there, but I had also spoken to the detailer for it was back then, it was the USS Parchie, and then the Richard B. Russell, which were the two spec ops boats that were stationed in Mare Island. And they would come through, and they filled 3 electricians on Parchie, 3 on Russell out of my 8805 power school class. And because I'd talked to them, and because of the top secret clearance, they go through your background. And if you got a clean record, no prior to the Navy issues and stuff like that, then you
Was
were
the
good.
basic TS slash SCI where you had to give 10
Right.
names and they investigated 10 names and finally
Yeah. So you had to
went
have
to the secondaries. All
TSSCI.
right, what's this guy really do?
Exactly. Well, so they interviewed neighbors at home and stuff like that. So my mom and dad are getting phone calls from the neighbors. Hey, somebody from the FBI showed up to the house asking about David, what's going on, and that kind of stuff.
It's hard
But
to remind people that we didn't have internet back then. For those who didn't
yeah,
know, both David and I, we did join the Navy same year in '87. So yeah, there was databases, but there was no internet. They did everything in person. Even pulled
that's
their
right.
friends out of class. At least they did.
Yeah, that's
for
right.
me. They're freaking out. What this guy do? Why am I getting pulled out of class asking about him? Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
oh yeah, they got more than one phone call.
yeah, exactly. So you go to the Parchie instead of taking the shore duties. What you do?
Well, I wanted the shore duty, but it's that, like you said a little bit ago, needs of the Navy, right?
Right.
So they can pick up most anybody to be a staff pickup. They can't find enough bodies to fill a TSSCI billet on a special projects boat. So that outweighs by a long shot. And I got told, sorry, you're going to Parchie. So, a couple of things. One, Idaho Falls it was great. It would have been great to stay there as a staff pickup and that kind of thing. But you either went to work or you drank and that kind of stuff. And there's no telling what would have happened to me if I stayed there. You know what I mean? As far as two
Oh yeah.
years
Yeah.
and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's
And
easy to get compromised that way. Yeah,
mm-hmm,
I know
right,
exactly what you're talking about.
right.
But
And going to Parchie was the best thing that could have ever happened to me in my Navy career, because one, the boat was just that special. Okay, for the viewers, that's the Parchie in the picture behind Eric's head up there, and if you look, that is they basically, when I got to the boat, they cut the bow, the nose cone off the original Parchie submarine. They moved it 100 and something feet down the dry dock, put 100-foot section in the middle forward of the sail, and welded it all back together. And when I got there, that 100-foot section was empty, and you were walking on
because you got
planks.
there in the yard, so this explains
Right,
the yard tour. Yeah, I wanted to know what
right,
that was about. Yeah.
yeah. So so it's one of those things where you sign that guarantee that says, for 99 years I won't talk about what the part you did, and that kind of stuff. So we tell everybody that hump you see in front of the sail, that's where the bowling alley, the spas and stuff like that were.
Yeah.
But it was a special projects platform, and we got to put it all together. We got to put all the stuff in it. To this day, I've still got a bunch of great friends that were on there that were actually working up forward, and we were stuck back aft doing nuke stuff, and
probably had a lot of what they used to call back in the day spooks up there.
Right, that's it. Yeah, for the most part, yeah, we had a lot of it
And that's
was
not a racist term. That was a term for
right.
people
Yeah,
that were doing,
exactly.
I mean, more than top secret stuff. Really secret. A good reference
Yes.
is, and I've referenced this before, is to read the Blind Man's Blood book,
Right.
and you can watch it on YouTube for free as well.
Yeah.
To get an idea of probably what you were doing on the Parchy.
Yeah, and I mean they talk about she I think her first name was Sherry Sontag or whatever.
Yep, that's correct. That's right.
She apparently interviewed people that knew stuff and things like that, and and one of those can neither confirm nor deny, but it talks about the Navy's special projects and things that had happened prior to us converting the Parchy, and old Parchy as I'll call it, and the Seawolf and the halibut and the boats before, and then it goes into Parchy, and then it evolved from Parchy and Richard B. Russell into the Jimmy Carter. And Carter kind of took over for Parchy when they decommed Parchy in '90.
What was the Russell a special projects boat as well?
Yeah, Richard B. Russell was.
I did not know that. Yeah.
Yep, we were one of the two boats. While we were in the yards, they were having to do all of the the deployments, if you will, for project stuff. And then after we started doing sea trials, if I remember right, middle 1990. Yeah, that'd be about right because I qualified and listed dolphins September 4th of '90,
So
and that was
after.
Right? What's that?
That was your qualification boat.
Yes, right. Yes, because they wouldn't send the nukes. We had too many like testing and stuff like that, hot ops, cold ops, all the kind of things you do after a refueling overhaul. So we didn't get to go out to sea and get our dolphins on another boat. But,
Yeah, that was because it's hard to get your dolphins when you're in yards. And
right.
We had nukes from like a new commissioning Ohio class, like the Wyoming. They would come out with a grant, and they would get our dolphins that way.
Right.
But that wasn't the case for you, though.
No, none of the nukes got to do that. The Ford guys, a good number of them went out, but now kind of a funny story. When we went out for our very first sea trial, I would guarantee you that about 75% of the command had never been to sea. We had that many, like, I'll call them junior, but everybody was provisionally qualified on watches. We went out to sea, did about probably a 5-day underway, came back into port, and basically, like if you were like all of us electricians and stuff, right? We all sat in a big circle, and you handed your qual card to the guy next to you, and you just started signing off all the provisional qualification stuff that the engineer signed off in the shipyard that said you knew how to do it. You just needed to do it out at sea. And so, you passed your cards around, everybody signed off their cards, and now you're really qualified.
It's probably a good thing Rookover wasn't there, huh?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that whole provisional qualification stuff in the SORM is it's outlined, and we followed the letter of that law, but you get back in the port, and everybody just signed off qual cards to get everybody kind of taken care of. But our first underway, in that photo behind you, when you get out underneath the Golden Gate Bridge, they call that area the Potato Patch for some reason. The Napa River flows down out of Napa, comes around
and that
San Clemente
right there.
Right. That's right.
That's a good shot right there, yeah.
And in the photo, we're inside the Golden Gate, across from Alcatraz in that photo. And so Alcatraz would be off to the right as you're looking at it. But once you get out from underneath the Golden Gate Bridge, it's called the Potato Patch. It's real choppy. Well, when we were at the pier getting ready to go underway, the corpsman came through the boat and asked everybody, hey, anybody want Dramamine pills? And so for the most part, all my buddies and stuff are like, nah, we don't need any Dramamine. We don't need it. And when I was 12, my dad took me deep sea fishing. I puked for 12 hours. So I told the doc, I'll take some Dramamine. So of course I got called all kinds of, names and this, that, and the other and whatever. Well, when we hit the Potato Patch outside the Golden Gate Bridge, all of my buddies that were giving me grief were all seasick. And so basically, I went around and kind of, kicked them when they were down, if you will, and told them, I guess you should have taken the Dramamine,
Yeah.
But we went out, we did all the sea trial stuff, and then for the next,
And what year was
basically,
this? What year was this? I'm sorry.
that was 90 and 91. And
Right as
then,
Desert Storms happening, right around that time.
you're right. Yeah, so I got there in '89. So within about a little over a year, we were ready to go out to sea and do sea trials. And then 1991. And so from that period until June of '93, we were doing all of the like sound trials up in Alaska. We had to go do torpedo certs, and we had to go do, the atypical TRE and the ORS and that kind of stuff. But we also started doing a bunch of underways where we tested the bowling alley, and we tested the spas and all the stuff that we stuck
So,
in that forward cone
had to do an
section,
ORS
right?
for the reactor, of course, and all that stuff.
Right, right.
So you spend a lot of
And,
time doing that.
yes, and so I was there until June. I transferred basically June of '93. And so that 4 year period there, I was blessed enough to be around a lot of great individuals. Um, our captain was now retired Admiral Miles Walkendorf. He was gruff, but he was amazing ship driver, captain, that kind of thing.
Fair kind of guy.
Yeah. He was a hard charger, and he got into the Spec Ops program and went far. And if you look him up, I can't give you the official title, but he was basically the uh, Russian attaché or something. He was in Russia for a while, and that kind of, as an admiral, spent time over there.
Oh, that's the wall drop and stuff. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. So he was stationed over there. One of his later commands after he, made admiral, but he was a great captain, fair with it, fair with the guys. If you worked hard for him, he took care of you. So, and then, like I said, there's guys off the boat that I talk to all the time. This past football season was in Dallas with 3 or 4 of them. I hadn't seen them since the early '90s, and I'm a Rams fan. We went to a Rams Dallas game in Texas Stadium, or whatever they call it now, but AT&T, I think. But so I met up with a bunch of old Parchy guys last year. So, um, great guys out there.
Yeah.
I can name them all for you. What's that?
They're the best friends you ever have in the Navy.
Yeah. And it's hard to find that in civilian life. It's hard to find people that are
that brotherhood,
that like-minded.
People talk about a brotherhood, but it's not the same. Like
it's not
in the Navy, or what these guys have been doing the last 20 years in Afghanistan,
right.
Iraq, completely different. I wanted to bring something else because I like cross-referencing what you've been doing and going back with your training again. So you try to do a little bit in fitness. You sold some fitness products, and I could tell you work out, which, for the people up front of the boat, they always think the nukes or the mystery guys are quiet. They're brainiacs. They're skinny with the glasses. And it looks like you pushed a little bit of weight.
Well, yeah, my first year and a half in the Navy, I didn't have a car, so I spent 2 or 3 hours a day in the gym, and I pretty much stayed focused on that. I had goals and that kind of stuff, and it got to the point where I've never done steroids, anything like that in my life, and we played a lot of softball, and you'd hear people that would say stuff like that, but I just worked hard. I did. I went by the adage of you lift heavy and that's what I did. I had two guys. Dean Brach was another electrician on Parchy, and Rod Paplow was a mechanic, and we were best of friends, and we were gym partners, and we would spend hours in the gym. And then underway on the Parchy, you had to find a T in 2 passageways, and you would set a little 12-inch square naugahyde covered little foot locker. We'd set it. We'd set it in the middle of the tee, and you'd have the bar with some weights, and you'd lay back on it, and somebody pick the bar up and hand it to you, and you do your reps, and you'd set it back down, and we made do with what we had, and so I worked out most of my life. I'm 53 now, and numerous surgeries and that kind of stuff. I'm a lot smaller than I used to be, but a lot weaker for sure. But I got into the fitness thing probably as far as like selling clothes and stuff. Probably 4 or 5 years back, I guess. Me and a friend of mine were at a bike rally out in the Outer Banks in North Carolina, and this drunk guy stumbles up, and my buddy was a pretty big guy too, but this drunk guy stumbles up to me, and he's like, "Dude, you're like bigger than God, man." That kind of thing. He was drunk. And, I said, "Nah, dude, nobody is," or whatever. But we started this apparel line together, and it was called Bigger Than Gods with an S. And we played off all of the like mythical gods and stuff. So like the guy we use for our emblem, in one shirt, he was smashing Thor, and he took Thor's hammer, that kind of stuff. And so we kind of played off that for a while. But when you sell clothes at bodybuilding shows and powerlifting events, and I spent the first year and a half fighting off. I'm in the South. It's the Bible Belt for a reason. It's called that.
Yeah, where are you fight off again? I didn't ask.
I'm from North Carolina,
North Carolina, where you went to college. Right. Okay, yeah, that worked.
Right.
Okay.
So when you spend hours explaining to people that the term "bigger than gods" with an S refers to mythical gods, I mean, literally, people would come up, and I'd start getting the church sermon about nobody's bigger than God, and it's blasphemy for you to put this on a shirt, and that kind of stuff. And so I ended up changing the apparel name and became Iron Addictions. But that's what got me into the emblematic stuff. And I started, after I'd gotten into that, that's when I started making Submarine shirts and trying to sell shirts, because when I look online, or if I look on Facebook, I mean, there's some cool stuff out there, but there's also some not so cool stuff. You know what I mean? And I wanted to create something that was different.
Go ahead and say your website real quick, by the way.
So my website is submarinebrotherhoodapparel.com. Obviously one long string of words, submarinebrotherhoodapparel.com. And there's very few shirts on there anymore. I got out of the screen printing stuff. It just got kind of cumbersome. But my coins are on there.
The video when we're done too. I had another question. Do you think working out like you did helps you achieve? Because we haven't gotten into the rest of your career. Did it keep you focused and what you wanted to do in your Navy career, and how and the heights that you went to?
Yeah. When you set yourself into set up yourself for goals and you want to attain stuff. So for me, working out all the time, it was, I got to be able to bench 405, and I need to 4 plates on each side, and you push until you get to that point and you go past it. And so that determination and wanting to, I'm a very competitive person. Most people, most military people tend to be alpha males, or try to be, and that kind of thing. And I've always been if you can do it, I can do it too, because you can't, you're not better than me, right? That kind of thing in my career. And after when I left Parchie and went to A school as an instructor, I got to Orlando. The guys I started hanging out with, and we played basketball all the time, they were talking one morning about this program they were putting in for, and I asked them a couple of questions, and it was the enlisted commissioning program. And I asked them,
let's go ahead and talk about that. Let's go into how you got the ECP. Yeah.
Okay. So they told me about what they were putting in for, and so I looked it up real quick. And now I got to Orlando in June. You had to have your package in before October 1st. So you had to have recommendation letters. You had to have, everything, the package filled out and a bunch of other stuff. Your transcripts from prior college, because the enlisted commissioning program, you had to have at least 30 hours of college already completed, because in that program you stayed active duty.
About 2
You
years, right?
well, you got up to 36 months if you were going into a engineering program, 30 months if you were going into a non-engineering degree, right?
Okay.
So you had to have 30 to 36 credits before you to even apply for it. So I put together a package real fast. I turned it in. There were 8 people out of the command there at Nuke Field A School and Nuke Power School that put in for the ECP. I was ranked 6th. There were 5 staff guys that were ranked ahead of me, and 2 students that put in for it behind me. And because I was new to the command, I got ranked 6th.
So,
Well, they
well,
came
back
out.
up there a second. So the students that you were teaching could put in for it too if they
Yeah,
had
because
prior
there
college.
was. Yeah, because they were. I mean, yeah, a typical nuke story is you guys went to college and dropped out of college or failed
And
out
I,
or whatever, and then they came in the Navy, right? It's a atypical kind of nuke thing. You either did to be, most people that were nukes, you either didn't have money to go to college, so you didn't, or you went to college and you dropped out, and or even some of them were most of the way through with college and couldn't afford it anymore themselves, and they came in the Navy, but. So the day they told me that I didn't get accepted for the ECP that year
uh,
was the day that I downloaded the instruction for the next year, and I literally started that day putting my package together.
so the
Um,
first time you applied, you did not get it.
I did not get it,
Okay.
and so at that point I'm pushing 27, and you mentioned it earlier, you couldn't get commissioned past your 31st birthday, because I think there's something that has to do with the fact that you can't turn 51 and still be in the Navy unless you're an admiral,
So
something to that effect, right?
and on top of that, since it's an engineering program, you're
Right,
regular line officer once you're
right,
commissioned
right.
instead of
Yeah,
like a
so we were
weapons
we were unrestricted, right?
unrestricted. Well, let's
Yeah,
back up just a little bit. I mean,
yeah,
part of the instructor. So you've been rejected for ECP the first time, but you're on instructor duty. So how'd you
right.
like that?
I loved it. Teaching. We got when you got out of boot camp as a nuke, they marched you across the base over to nuke school and A school, and they mustered you over there. We picked them up. You separated them. Here's all the electricians, the ETs, the MMs. You gave them a barracks room, and then you started their pipeline through A school to get their rate, and then they go to power school after that. So I taught EM systems, which was week 8 through 12 out of 16. So they got through their like basic electricity and basic math and that stuff, and then
Is
came to
this
us for us to
this
teach
the
them
A
motors and
school we're
generators.
talking about? So
What's that?
this is the A school we're talking about.
Right, A
So
school.
they don't know if they're going to be an EM or MM or
No, they know
oh they
you
do.
know that in boot camp. Come out
Oh,
of boot
boot
camp,
camp they
you get
come out with the designator already. Okay.
right, right. So they come out of boot camp. They know that they're either electrician, electronics tech, or mechanic. We get them. We start teaching them, and um, we take them. And then what they go once they finish their A school. So they come out as a nuke. You come out of boot camp as an E3. You finish A school, and you become an E4. And then during power school, there were 2 things. You either hit 2 years in the Navy and you could star reenlist for E5
Right.
and get,
Familiar with that. Yep.
and then, or you took the E5 exam and you passed it and you made E5. So um, I didn't reenlist for E5. I made it off the test. So when I showed up at Parchie, I put on E5 right as I got there, and then, so 2 years later or whatever made E6. So most nukes are
Yeah, so
E6s
your
by
career
the
was kind of like in your hand, where a lot of nukes they re-enlist because of the money.
right. It's
There's
money.
a
It's a
there
big thing.
sometimes could be a significant amount of money if you re-enlist.
Yeah, back then we thought it was significant. Now, good
It's
Lord,
nothing.
I mean they're re-enlisting for $90,000.
But
I mean
still,
it's crazy now.
it's a lot of money.
Yeah, but so yeah, so as an instructor there, I mean, I taught. I was an instructor for probably 10 classes of kids. I was there when they brought females back into the nuke power program to go on surface ships. Um, we spent that first year I was there, so mid '93 to early '94. We had to do all the sexual harassment and fraternization and all
Right.
that, all that, hey, you've got to live a life now where you have female students, what I mean? So we had all that training for the staff guys and stuff. And then the first batch of females were going to be fleet females that wanted to convert to become a nuke, and they were going to bring them back. But one by one, they all rejected the program and said they didn't want to do it. And so they had to bring them in through boot camp and that kind of thing. And if everybody out there remembers any Charlie Brown cartoons, anytime they showed the whole gang in a group, you'd see the little dust cloud as the whole group,
Yeah.
moves around like on the Peanuts. Well, that's how if in it, as an instructor there, you had duty like once a month, and you'd have to go over and stay at the barracks and muster the duty section and get the cleanup and stuff like that done, and you'd monitor the barracks, make sure nothing was going on. But that's how you knew where the females were. I'm telling you, they were groups of like 20 dudes would just like shift from one
They
place
just
to the
go
other
going
because
around.
because there'd be one
That's
or
very
two
clever.
females over here. Yeah, and just like the little Peanuts gang, they like moved to the next little group of the females and stuff,
And
and it
then
was
you had
crazy. But
the Fashion Square Mall right outside the base,
yes,
and they're following each other around there in their whites.
yes, I can't tell you how many we once they started finding out that if they could get married, they could live out in
Oh,
town. They didn't have to do barracks inspections, all this stuff. We would get request kits. They had to fill out a special request kit to get married, but they weren't smart about it. It would be like a female mechanic and a male electronics tech. The mechanic school was only 12 weeks. The ET school was 26. The female, or whichever one was in the short school, they would finish at 12 weeks. Then they would go to power school and do that 6 months, and then they'd have to transfer. And their husband or wife, whichever one was in like the longer school, would be left behind, and they're always like, but can't we stay here until no, we told no, you got to go to the fleet. And it was crazy back then.
did
It
you have
really was.
situations too? Because I've heard of this. Get married just to take advantage of what you said, but didn't really have a
There were
relationship.
I can't say they didn't, but I'm telling you, they got married fast.
Yeah,
And
just happened what
I,
it is.
it was crazy.
Women, especially integrating with submarines, that's a big topic. Maybe we can touch on that a little bit later. But
Okay.
so you're really focused on your enlisted commissioning program for the second time, and you're doing your master training specialist
Right.
endorsement at the same time as this. What's that?
Right.
What do you got to do to get that?
So master training specialist designation, you basically have to get certified as an in-class instructor. So you have to have like an officer board that sits in on your lectures, and they grade you. Your supervision, so your chiefs and your master chiefs, and then the department head that's over the school would come in and sit in your class, and you had to teach so many lectures. You had to have already been teaching for such a whatever, some period of time. I can't remember now, but and you got graded. And if you weren't a good instructor and your classroom didn't respond to you, you wouldn't make it. Um, the qualification process there just to become an instructor was was pretty intense in itself, and we I just loved it. I enjoyed being in front of the students, and I treated them like I'll say humans. I took care of my students,
Right.
and I've kind of had the adage, take care of your people, and your people will take care of you. You know, when I right, and I cut up and I joked around and I played with the students, whenever it was time, and so they kind of, I guess, they enjoyed having me as their instructor, so they would do what they had to do to be successful, and I'd show them how to do that, and kind of give them pointers and how to go about getting themselves through school and help the ones that are struggling and stuff. And learning that there at A school as an instructor is what helped me after I got commissioned and I went back to prototype as a staff training group and officer in 2002 when I went to Boston Spa the prototype up there as a shore tour. You learn.
You were married at this time too. Your first wife was in school.
Yeah, I got married.
At children.
I have one.
So you got the stress of having a family, doing the master training specialist,
and a newborn,
taking care of students, a newborn. Yep. Yeah. That's complete craziness.
It was crazy, and so that second year package that I put in for the ECP, back then, I wrote and requested a recommendation letter from every elected official in the state of North Carolina. So, both senators, all the congressmen, the governor, lieutenant governor, everything like that. So I sent off and said, hey, this is who I am. This is what I'm applying for. And they send me back a recommendation letter. I took the Navy Submarine League book, and it had all the retired admirals that lived. I found every one of them that lived in North Carolina, sent them letters. I get some that said, hey, the admiral doesn't know you, so he's not going to write you. But I got letters back.
None of the politicians do you
either. Yeah, exactly. But I got letters back from admirals and stuff. So I probably had 15, 20 recommendation letters from these admirals and from all these elected officials and this, that, and the other from DC and all this letterhead stuff.
Is required for ECP normally?
Well, now after so my package went in, and the lieutenant LDO that I worked for, he wrote so you had to go through a 3-officer panel that sat and interviewed you, and they would write a recommendation letter for you. And so if you remember back in the 87 time, back then, whenever you get your eval, you could have font changes and bold words and stuff like that. Well,
it was different. The 5.0,
yeah. Right. He wrote these recommendation letters, and so he's got all these big words, and they're bolded, and this, that, and the other. And I've got all these. Anyway, so my package went in. I got selected. I had to call. Back then it was CNET, Chief of Naval Education and Training. I had to call CNET to ask them some questions about the after you've gotten picked up, the transfer process and stuff. And I'm talking on the phone to this lady that works at CNET, and I give her my name, and I give her my social security number, and I hear her rummaging through packages, and then all of a sudden she goes, "Wow." I said, "You looking at my package, aren't you?" She goes, "Yeah." She said, "Your package was ranked number 1 out of 178 people got selected that year." But that year, because of my package, I'm telling you, my package was 2 inches thick. My package, they changed the procedure. From that point on, you could only have a recommendation letter from your active CO and one other previous CO, and that was it. So they got rid of all of that. They directed that it was a 12-point Times New Roman font, no bold letters, no this, no that. Right. All the stuff that was in my package, they got rid of after that.
Yeah, that
But
shows the southern charm of a
that's
motivated
right.
boy from
That's
Carolina,
that's
what he
right,
can do.
son. They told me I didn't make it that first year. I'm like, there is absolutely no way
It's
I
gonna
don't make it
happen this
next year.
time. I know
That's
what to
right.
do.
That's right. Yep. Yep.
So you got picked up for ECP obviously, and uh do they you have to pick a college, it's Navy ROTC, I would guess, right?
Correct.
So and
So
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so I wanted to move back home, come back to North Carolina. State of North Carolina at the time had NC State, North Carolina, so UNC Chapel Hill, which is the Tar Heels, and Duke University. Well, because of the program, you stay active duty and you pay for college yourself. So they wouldn't let you go to Duke because Duke was $36,000 a year at the time, and they wouldn't allow you to amass that much student loans, student debt to go there. So it was either State or Carolina. I've been a Tar Heel fan all my life, but they want you to go into an engineering program
Right.
so that you can get an engineering degree and then come back into the fleet.
Oh,
Go,
like a
they really
STEM like program, undergraduate STEM.
they really want you to come back in the nuke pipeline again with an engineering degree and that kind of thing. So I got accepted into the nuke engineering program at NC State. I transferred there week one. The dean of the engineering school. I had to go meet him. Um, I'd taken calculus 1 and 2 in 85, 86 before I joined the Navy. So this is now 95, 96. It's 10 years later. The dean at the engineering school said, hey, back when you took it, analytic geometry wasn't part of calculus 2, so we're going to make you retake calc 2. So I walk in this classroom. I walk in this classroom. It's 10 years removed from calculus. And that 10 years, they'd gone to the whole MATLAB thing where you do all your homework on the computer. So I didn't know how to do that. I'm sitting in class with this instructor. I think he was Puerto Rican. I couldn't understand him. He was saying theorem this, theorem that. I had absolutely no clue what he was talking about. And the letter you got in that package when you got picked up said, if you failed a class or have C's and definitely D's in your coursework, we'll basically write you an eval that will guarantee you never make the next pay grade and you'll go back to the fleet as an enlisted person. So
All
I know there's no way I have enough time to jump back, take calculus 1 again because of that 31-year age thing. That's going to the hard stop. I have to get commissioned before I turn 31. So the only other degree program that interested me on the other side of campus was criminal justice. So I dropped that math class in the drop window so I wouldn't get a
So
grade.
how'd you work that with? Because you said there was a requirement for engineering.
Yeah, well, so they want you, and and basically, I took the step of dropping that class to then try and figure out how I could go about working it. And I I remember I got called into the lieutenant that the ROTC instructor. She was a surface lieutenant, and she was my advisor. And she calls me in the room and she starts fussing at me and this, that, and the other. You can't drop classes on your own and this, that, and the other. And I pulled out that letter that said, look, it says right here, if I fail a class, I'm going back to the fleet. There's no way I can pass this class. I don't care what you say. I'm not failing a class, that kind of thing. And so there was nothing she could say. So I changed curriculum. I went into I stayed in all my other classes. I had I had 1 or 2 like nuke engineering core classes that, like sophomore, junior level that were like theory related. And I passed those and did well in those. It's just, I couldn't do that calculus. I just didn't have enough time to learn it on my own. And no TA sitting in a computer lab wants to teach somebody that's supposed to be basically a junior how to use MATLAB and
People
stuff.
don't. Yeah, I tell this story all the time. I remember was it 96? We got a direct order because the captain was really big on getting an email we signed an order saying we would check our email every day, and it's hard to believe you would have to sign something like that. But it was very difficult for us to join in the 80s that were working on IBM Selectric 3s, triplicates all the time. And then you started out on the word processor little laptops that were bulky things, and we didn't like that. But the computers, it was hard for us to make the transfer over. And then you going to college, even worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and once I transferred over to the political science side of the college, it's all about writing at that point. As long as you can write essays, or you can write reports and that kind of stuff. And I went to the non-engineering statistics class. All that stuff was easy to me, easy for me. So I enjoyed it. I had some really, really good classes and professors and stuff. And all my buddies growing up, the ones that all stayed home where I'm from, all became police officers in one shade or another. And that's what I wanted to do. At one point before I went in the Navy, I thought I would end up being a highway patrolman. But in that period of killing a couple of cars and dropping out of college, I had about 13 points on my license, and I figured there's no way they'd take me. Yeah, exactly. You're not going to be a highway patrolman, so I went in the Navy, right? But no, I enjoyed that, that part of the curriculum, and the net effect of it is I needed to get a degree to get commissioned, and so that's the whole goal, right? So the political science degree. Right. And so I graduated in December '97. I turned 30 in June of '97. So, I'm one semester. That was my last semester, basically, to finish school. So
and did very well and graduated. That's pretty much top of your class, right?
Right.
The type
yeah. I mean, a little over 3.7 average or whatever is what that kind of all plays out to.
But now, did you start dealing with the detailer at some point, like right before you graduate?
Yeah. You start kind of trying to deal with where you're going. So about 6 months out. So if I graduate in December, that summer would have been selection process time, where you say what you want to do and stuff. And the whole reason why I went submarines was, I kind of alluded to it a while ago, was I got seasick 12 hours, throwing up when I went deep sea fishing with my dad at 12. And you watch any old World War II movie or any Navy ship, surface ship thing in a typhoon or in a hurricane, and you watch them bouncing up and down, and I'm like, no way, I'm not getting sick. So I knew coming out of college that I was going back to submarines and going back in the new power program again. So,
and people don't understand why you pick submarines because of seasickness. It's because once you get underwater, it's smooth sailing.
Like sitting right here, like sitting in your living room.
Everybody thinks we got windows on board too, and that's when you're on the surface, there's no windows, so you got no reference. It's a round hole. You're rolling back and forth. You get real sick, and then everybody's like, "Dive! We gotta get this thing underwater."
Yep.
As soon as you're underwater, you're good to go.
We had an ELT on Parchy, my first boat. That guy would wear the wristbands. He would wear the little Band-Aid thing behind his ear. He would take Dramamine pills, and he still got sick. If we got anywhere near the surface and the boat started rolling a little bit, he would get sick. But he was a trooper. He he did his whole tour on the boat, and he just knew he was going to do it. The doc took care of him and made sure he had all those little patch thingies and stuff. Yeah. And the difference is, while I was in A school as an instructor, me and like 3 or 4 other instructors out of my office went deep sea fishing out of Clearwater, Florida, and I always like to tell people this was all back in phone book era, right? So if you found something, you had to find a phone book for that area, and in the perfect Navy storm, we were going to Clearwater.
Right.
We picked a hotel out of a phone book from the base library. We got booked the reservations. We drove out there, and we literally, the hotel was in between a Hooters on one side of it and a strip club on the other side. So how lucky do you get, right? You know what I mean? and it was the original Hooters and this,
So you
that, and
got
the other.
borderline and you got red light district.
That's right. That's right. That's right. So we but we went out to sea then. We went deep sea fishing, and the boat that took us out, one of the two diesels wouldn't start up. So he took us out on one motor, so we could never plane. So we wallowed, and we were all throwing up. But as an adult, you can throw up and function. As a 12-year-old, I was done for the minute I started getting
Yeah,
sick. And
Dad, you gotta take me home. I gotta go.
right. But you can't. You're stuck on that shit for on that boat for
Yeah,
12
he's
hours.
like, just stick it up, son. You have
That's
to be a
right.
man.
That's right. That's right. But that's why I went back to submarines as an officer and got commissioned December '97. Had to go to power school in Orlando again. I loved Orlando. Stationed there 3 times. I can't believe they closed the base, and
Yeah,
it was
Orlando was such a
political.
beautiful base. It's hard.
I,
I think I was talking to you about that earlier, and you can't even tell the place was there. They built all these
yeah,
new houses, and you go there now. I think they left the park where it has that training ship from boot camp.
right.
But other
Yep.
than
That's
that,
kind of like a memorial thing. It's over there on the what do they call it? The Blue Jacket.
uh-huh.
I think that's what they call it. The Blue Jackets over there. Um, Now, I remember because I was going there as an instructor it was BRAC 93 was the decision year that they decided to close down Orlando boot camp and then therefore the rest of the base. And it's political because Orlando compared to Great Lakes won every single graded category that they had, except for the fact that the Navy said they had to have brick buildings, and to relocate all the schools out of Great Lakes that are there, they were going to build, aluminum prefab buildings and stuff like that to house the new schoolhouses to save money. And so they said, "Oh, we got to have brick." And the senior senator that was in charge of that commission was from Illinois. He had businesses that were right in the surrounding area of Great Lakes. And when it came time to vote, he got all noble and said he was going to recuse himself and he wasn't going to, wasn't going to vote because it wouldn't be right.
Right.
But he's got 6 of his buddies sitting next to him. You can't tell me they weren't working backdoor deals saying, well, if you support me and vote to keep Great Lakes open, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that kind of
But
stuff goes on all the time. Both
oh
parties
yeah,
too. It does. We kind of
yeah,
touched on that. It doesn't
exactly.
matter what party. Yeah,
No, it doesn't.
that kind
But
of
when I
stuff.
went back as an officer, we shut down that base. I mean, the 6 months I was there, um, every command on the base was gone, and they had just built 7-story high-rise barracks. They had just built a brand new
Brand new
like
stuff. Oh man.
stuff on the other side of base, and all this stuff had never even opened, and they started trying to sell them off. I think Defense Finance took over one of the buildings out by the back gate, and this, that, and the other. But we're sitting in class, and tractor trailers are pulling up and taking up the giant anchors that were all kind of like out in the yards and stuff like that, and loading them on trucks and taking them up to Charleston to open and stuff like that. But so I loved it. Did well there. Prototype in Charleston as a student the second time to more training ships there in
That's what I want
Charleston.
to ask you about. So you've done. I mean, you've gone through the nuclear pipeline as a student.
Mhm.
Had the option to be an instructor as a student. Go out on Apache, active duty
Right.
instructor. Get commissioned, and now you got to do it all over again.
All over again.
So
Yeah.
what's that like?
Well, when you go back as a prior enlisted officer, it was kind of tough. I mean, the school part wasn't, other than math. So the nuclear program, from the days of Rickover all the way to today, they like to show that statistically they have the same average across the board, that the program is the same as it was in the 50s as it is now, by saying our average is a 3.1 or whatever, right? So
Right.
how do you take a bunch of engineering students and make sure that your class average is around a 3.1? Well, you fail guys like me who didn't have calculus in college, and because the math course for an officer is nothing but like calculus 3 and differential equations. I mean, that's what it is. And so I didn't do very well in that math class. I went to, thankfully, my advisor was a C returnee lieutenant instead of one of the pickup LDOs that they commissioned right out of college to be instructors. And I walked into him. I think his name was Lieutenant Cook. And I walked in. I said, listen, I said, I'm going to pass power school. Don't put me on mandatory study hours because I failed this math. And he basically said, I'm not worried about you or whatever. I won't put you on mandatory, because you could get mandatory 25, which meant you had to put in or more, at least 25 hours of study time.
Yeah, I want to touch on this because the same thing in the school I went in for Swazi, program, a dam neck. It's not something you have to experience in college. So if you don't do well, and what means not doing well might be you got below 3.6. It could be some, and next thing you know, you got an extra 20 hours or extra 25 hours on top of your 40-hour week.
Right. I mean, I remember guys that were on mandatory 45s. So do that math. 7 days, you're doing at least 6 hours of study time a day. That means you get out of school at 1600. You got enough time to go to the chow hall and eat dinner. And then you got to come back in and sign in, and you're studying until almost midnight every single day. And so like I said, I was fortunate enough he didn't put me on hours. I did well enough in all the other classes and stuff, and we made it through. But the funny thing about our power school class, because we were the next to last class in Orlando, we only have one officer section. Usually the officer side has about four or five sections, meaning 20 to 30 students times 4 or 5. But we were the only officer section there, and there were 23 of us. There were 14 commissioned officers and 9 civilians, because CAPL, which is the Kessering Atomic Power Laboratory, and Bechtel Bettis, they're the ones that staff the prototypes, right? So they're run by a civilian company, and they send civilians that they hire out of engineering school to go get qualified, just like the officers do, to be instructors at the prototypes. So 14 officers, 9 civilians. Out of the 14 officers, 9 of us were prior enlisted. Out of the 9 civilians, 5 of them were prior enlisted. So our whole class, for the most part, had gone through power school as an enlisted person. So our class had the attitude of, as long as we pass, it doesn't matter, right? You know what I mean? We didn't, because you always had that one guy that went for the watch, right? The watch was the highest GPA or whatever. You won something, a watch or whatever, something like that. But nobody in our class wanted it. And so we put in minimum stuff. Yeah, because we all knew, you knew the game, you knew that, you'd already been through and stuff. And I played softball like 5 nights a week in Orlando, and that kind of played out in town and stuff like that with people that I knew. And the benefit of all my prior enlisted time, there were guys that were there that were instructors that I'd been stationed with, on the Parchy and or had gone through prototype and power school with them, and they'd all came back as instructors too, and that kind of thing. But anyway, so that 6 months was good for the most part. Very, very few issues there. And then prototype, I go to prototype, and so the Parchy was an old S5W plant, which is one of the designators for the Corps. And you go to prototype in Charleston, it's 2 S5W old submarines that
those are the 241 from Freedom that were tied up to Naval Weapons Station.
Right.
One was the Woodrow Wilson. I can't remember the other one.
So Daniel Webster and
wasn't the Wilson? I could be wrong.
635. Hang on. Lord.
Yeah, I got my extra computer here. I could probably look it up, but
I got a coin that's sitting right
you
over
got
here
some coins, huh?
somewhere. I'm sorry. Yeah. Now if I can make myself,
You
yeah,
said to
the
cut the
Daniel
missile
Webster,
compartments out of the
Sam Rayburn. The
Sam
other one was the
Rayburn.
Sam
That's
Rayburn.
right.
Right.
So just to
Right.
explain that, because of the SALT II treaty, all the 41 for freedom boats had to be decommissioned. That was because of the nuclear weapons treaty we had with Russia, even though the Cold War had ended. So they did take 241 for freedom boats, cut the missile compartments out of them, weld them back together, and they turned them into training
Right.
reactors. Basically, weld them to the Pier Naval Weapons Station Charleston, which is another great place to have duty, by the way, because I was stationed there
Yes.
too. So
Yes. So when I got the prototype, so now you have an ensign with his butter bar that shows up at prototype, and I'm wearing my silver dolphins. And back in those days, midshipmen would go on midshipman cruise for the summer, and you'd have captains that would basically give
give him
officers silver dolphins on their midshipman cruise. They cut out most of the qual card. They let them do a few things here or there, and
half
they give them
CM,
this
half
little,
unfortunately.
yeah,
Yeah.
give them gimmies, right? And as an enlisted guy that earned your dolphin,
That hurts.
it pisses you off because it cheapens your silver dolphins. So when I got the prototype, the first couple of weeks there, my my running buddy in prototype, he and I were both at the time we got picked up, 8 to 10 year prior enlisted. He was a mechanic. I was a electrician, and so I went to the 635. He went to the 626, and so we were racing each other. It was which one of us is going to get qualified first. And you walk on the command, and you get your qual cards, and you start getting checkouts right away. And so I get there, and there were 5 staff instructors that were there that were junior guys on the Parchie when I was an EWS qualified, supervisor, and I qualified them. Now I get the prototype, and there's staff guys that can sign my books. There's 5 of them. There's probably 4 or 5 guys that I'd known from other commands that knew me. So a bunch of people knew, who I was. And then for the ones that didn't, I remember I walked on the forward end on the boat, and there was a mechanic that was digging through some file folders, and I walked up behind him, and I said, "Hey," I said, "do you have time for a checkout?" Because I needed a checkout to get some stuff signed off. And I remember he kind of looks back at me like this, and he goes, "Are those real?" Talking about my dolphin, right? Yeah. Or were they midshipman dolphins? I said, "Well, considering I got them when you were probably still in grade school, I'll pretty much guarantee you they're real." Right. Right. So after everybody knew that, hey,
That
this
was pretty
guy,
braggish for you to say.
right? Well,
hey,
it
it
was a
is what
point of
it is,
pride,
right?
right? Yeah, it's a point of pride, right? I earned them, and here you are, a butter bar, and everybody thinks you're clueless, and that. It's so that's a hard transition for a lot of guys that get commissioned to go from, you're an E6, you're an E7, or whatever, depending on, regardless of what program, all of a sudden you put on ensign bars, and everybody treats you like you're just somebody out of college, and you don't have the knowledge that you have. And until they figure that out, you've got to prove yourself. So I had a bit of an attitude when I went back. I guess I was pretty cocky, I think, but I mean, I was ready to go to my board by week 10. I mean, they have a curve. It's called a training curve. So if you have, call it 2,000 signature points you have to get from day 1 to the last day 6 months later, you have to get so many points a day to stay on that qual path to make sure you get finished in time. And so they post every couple of days where you're at on the qual curve. You're either below it or you're ahead of it.
Yeah, and
Well,
this is kind of hard to explain to a civilian that's got an undergraduate engineering degree and's
right,
gone.
right.
I don't know what would be an example. Gone to Raytheon and to do your job, whatever your engineer, and you're supposed to be on some kind of qual program, which doesn't exist. But basically, within a year, if you don't complete it, you lose your job. And that's kind of like what it's like in the Navy, and they really push you. And they push you that way for a reason, because they got to get you in the fleet.
Right. You got to get through that school and prove yourself, so you can go out and do the same thing to man up a submarine. Because for you to show up for any student, enlisted officer, for you to get detailed to a boat, you're there because somebody else has to leave. And so you're taking somebody who's been on the boat for a couple of years and replacing them with somebody who's never been to the boat. So it's that constant turnover. But
you got to be completely capable to assume that person's job.
Right. They got to know. They got to know that when you get to the boat and you get a real qual card on a real plant that you could kill the rest of the crew on, because you're on the submarine, that you're going to be successful and you can get qualified and that kind of thing. But no, I was probably 69-70% ahead of the curve at one time. I could have gone to my board at week 10, but the command wouldn't send me up for it because they said the admiral wouldn't believe that I could be done that fast or whatever. But I qualified early, and then I got to leave to go to sub school with the class ahead of me.
And where was sub school, officer school? Was that in Groton or?
In Groton, yes. So you, as a sub, you stayed in this. You remember Groton? You remember the Ssell Chalet?
Yeah, I remember the officers up there training all the time. They had a separate building.
Right. We had to stay in what they call it, the Ssell Chalet, or it was that hotel that was on the top of the hill, way up there, or whatever. And that's where they housed all of us. And you went to what's called Submarine Officer Basic course, right? SOBIC. And that's where you learned all of it.
Yeah, basic navigation and
fire control.
You stayed out of the reactor. You started to learn the front end of the ship.
Front end.
Weapons.
What they call fighting the ship.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Ship driving. All
that
kind of stuff.
So you went through little trainers and you did different stuff like that or whatever to kind of learn the forward end of the ship.
And how many weeks would that be?
13, if I remember right. I think it was 13 weeks. I know some. So my wife at the time. So I went to power school by myself for 6 months. I went to Charleston for 6 months, and then I went to, and that's why when I shouldn't say 6 months. I should have been there 6 months, but I qualified and left 8 weeks early because she and my oldest daughter stayed in North Carolina while I was going from command to command, so they wouldn't have to move 3 times until I got to my first submarine.
We should remind people that you were a father at this time, raising a family. On top of all this pressure and getting all this done at the same time. So, I mean, it just kind of adds on to everything else that's happening. So you got, was it needs of the Navy, and based on how well you did in the sub-school program, what boat you got? Because you got the Wyoming next.
Right. They give you a boat out of prototype. And originally I got orders to Maine Blue. I was supposed to go to USS Maine.
So you knew before you went to sub school what?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. But because I left prototype 8 weeks early, they rotated me from Maine to Wyoming, and then I went through the SOBIC courses up there, knowing that I was going to USS Wyoming out of Kings Bay, Georgia, and I finished sub school, and we moved to St. Mary's, Georgia, in June of '99 when I moved there, and my wife at the time and my oldest daughter, they moved down at that point, and
well, they had more than a Walmart at that point.
Yeah, a little bit, not much more. It's a lot bigger now.
Yeah, I know it is.
I went back 2 years ago now, maybe year and a half ago. We did a Wyoming Blue Crew reunion about a year and a half ago or so, and went back down there and stayed. And it's obviously a lot bigger now than it ever was back in '99.
Yeah, back in the same. So you got to the Wyoming, and it was basically still a pretty new boat. Probably what, 3-4 years old at that time?
Well, I was there for patrols 8 through 16 because Blue Crew got the even numbers, Gold Crew was the odd numbers. So I was patrol 8, which meant you were about 3.5 years into doing patrols. So she was commissioned, I think, 94, 95, somewhere around there had to have been. I think
Right.
you said you were telling me you were there
Yeah, I
like
remember. We
97.
did the DSO on it when I was in '02 at Cape
Right.
Canaveral. Yeah, I'm trying to remember what year that was. I was around '97 or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I got there
Yeah,
in
but it
90.
takes. They got to get commissioned. They got to do TRE or it's kind of like all the stuff you said on the bargee.
Right.
And
So
Jason's the
you end
same
up,
thing.
right. You end up doing, I think they do basically 4 patrols a year based on, you know, overhauls and this, that, and the other, and time in the yards and stuff. But you average 3 to 4 patrols a year. So I got there at patrol 8. So yeah, they'd only been going, they'd only been doing patrols for 2 years at that point. So everything was new. Um, and, so you start your qual program back aft to be a nuke.
So you're
And
going from an older boat, older reactor training, and
right,
this is a new reactor or
right,
new reactor at the time, anyways.
correct.
So
So totally different controls and the tridents are natural circulation plants, so you had to learn that.
right.
Um, basically at slow speed, you turn off all the pumps, and the way it's configured, hot water goes up, cold water goes down, so it just basically flows water through the reactor core. But you can only do that up to a certain power, right? So when a trident goes alert, which is for anybody that's watched Crimson Tide, that was the whole missile shooting thing where Denzel Washington and
That's the one where Denzel Washington should have been shot in the first 20 minutes, and the missiles would have gone
correct,
down right
correct
there.
for exactly for refusing orders and
Yeah.
stuff like that, right? But so between him and Gene Hackman or whatever. So when you're alert and you're a missile guy, you're the ready missiles for the nuclear triad. Um, you're in natural circulation because you
Six
want to
knots
turn
to
off.
nowhere. Yeah, just
Right.
turn it.
You,
Just
you
listen.
want to you want to turn off as many things as you can to not make noise so that you can't get
I
detected.
read
And
somewhere that the Russians said that the Tridents were so quiet that they looked for a hole of sound because normally underwater you hear biologics,
right,
shrimp clicking and everything, and
right,
they would attempt. I mean, they never found us
mm,
that much, but
yeah.
that's how they would
It,
find us a hole of sound. That's how quiet
it,
they were.
I'll be honest with you. In further down the career, once I got to Greenville and we started doing fast boat type stuff, it's the same thing with doing ops with diesel boats. We did ops with Korea and South Korea and Japan and stuff like that. And I'm here to tell you, you can't hear a diesel boat either if they're on the
Oh
batteries, and
yeah,
that's
diesel
that's
boats
what,
are the best quiet. Those was it Danish or Swedish the air independent propulsion plants?
that's getting really big. The Germans building a lot of them too.
Yeah,
They're
that's a hard boat to deal with.
So when you do ops with those guys, I mean, the Navy has all these water separation rules so you don't crash into each other. You get a shallow boat, you get a deep boat, and so they're
It's
not
like
in your
airlines. You have to
stratum.
take different paths in the sky.
Yeah, yeah. So if you did it with a diesel boat, they always got the shallow because they'd have to go up to snorkel and
Right,
stuff, right? So
makes sense.
so they would be shallow, you'd be deep, and then you have a separation zone that nobody could go in. And whenever you were doing like one-on-one shooting torpedoes at each other kind of operations, that's if you heard a noise that was not biologics, you basically shot a torpedo at that bearing, because if you didn't, they would shoot you. I mean, and you're talking 2,000 yards. You're close. So you can't
Wow.
hear them on the batteries. And it's the same way Tridents were. And the Tridents when you're out doing 2 or 3 knots and you're just not moving
Bore
anywhere. I
shot
mean,
loaded and snapshot right on that bearing, huh?
yeah,
Just
yeah,
had to go out.
that's you'd be at firing point procedures and you'd hear a noise and the captain would be like snapshot to whatever this bearing and you put a torpedo that way and you know be damned whether you hit it or not. You
The
know what I mean?
Navy's had
You
a
get great
NATO
for
exercise too, just a week ago up there.
it.
So, and with the
Yeah.
AIP submarines as well, and
Mhm.
probably well, they were talking about how they're aircraft killers and they could take out our aircraft carriers, which,
Right.
which probably could be true. I don't know.
Uh, yeah. But you get into a shooting war like that though, every single screen ship in an aircraft carrier's whatever battle group is going to be running around with active sonar. They're going to be pinging every single bearing, and they'll fry every fish between here and wherever. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And the bad thing about the diesel boats, once they come up and snorkel, you got them. And if you catch them at the wrong time, but the war game stuff was always a lot of fun. We enjoyed doing that too. So
Let's briefly go over what MPA, DCA, and COMO mean for people that
okay.
don't know.
So when I first got there to Wyoming as a junior officer, they give you a division to run. Usually you get the electrician because that's the least intrusive job as a junior officer because you have very few packages that are QA type packages that the mechanics have. You don't have to submit stuff involved with like reactor controls that the ETs do. So atypically the junior guys get the electricians as their first division officer stint, but because I was a prior electrician, they made me the MPA, which is the main propulsion assistant. So I was a division officer for the nuke mechanics and the ELTs. Did that for 2 patrols. We had a great crew. Funny story. Back then, when we came in, if you remember Top Gun, everybody on the nuke base went out and bought a crotch rocket, had a motorcycle, and ninjas and
Oh
hurricanes
yeah, back
and
then, yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
So
Well,
I
everybody
had
joined in '87 because of Top Gun.
right. I had a FZ 750 Yamaha, and it was a special edition bike. There only are like 500 of them sold in the United States,
Oh wow, yeah.
and so when I rode around, there was never anyone that had my motorcycle, right? Because it was just that rare. Well, there for a short period of time, I saw another one just like mine on the base. So this is 87, 88. That person transferred away with a graduating class. I never saw that bike again. 99, I show up on Wyoming. I'm the MPA for the mechanics. I get qualified as engineer officer of the watch, and I was touring through the engine room, and the mechanics were all in the engine room upper level, just kind of shooting a breeze and stuff, and we started talking, and somebody brought up motorcycles, and I said something about, yeah, I had a motorcycle, but very few people have one like mine. And one of the mechanics, his name is Dave Sanjay. He's like, what kind of bike did you have? I said, it was a Yamaha. He's like, do you have an FZ 750? And I'm like, yeah, how'd you know that? He goes, because I was the guy that had the other one, right?
Oh, yeah.
So that's how small the world is. 10
Yeah,
years
yeah.
later, and I'm on a command with the guy I never knew back then that I just saw that motorcycle riding around. But so I ran the nuke mechanics for 2 years. Great learning experience with QA and QA inspections and packages for hydraulics and this, that, and the other for all the subsafe stuff and learning all the systems that basically kind of keep the boat safe, if you will, and anti-flooding, that kind of stuff. Then I became the DCA, which is damage control assistant. So I got to move up what I'll call forward. Now you take over the auxiliarymen. So they're the non-nuke mechanics on the boat. So they get all the ship's hydraulic stuff. They get all of the air systems. They get all the crap tanks and anything sanitation stuff or whatever. And let me tell you, I had a chief, and he went on to be a master chief and fleet master chief and all this other stuff. And his name was Vinny Vinson, and Vinny was, to this day, one of the best chiefs I've ever been around. And he had a division of 12 or 13 auxiliarymen. And so I had them for 2 patrols. So basically 2 years kind of thing, or around that kind of time, a little over a year, I should say, not 2 years. That group of A-gangers from, very junior E5s through senior E6s, out of 12 or 13 guys, I would about bet you that 11 of them made chief and higher. Okay. And I've never seen anything like it.
You were a class officer with that group.
Yeah. Every single one of those guys. I mean, they all went on to, to be chiefs and senior chiefs and stuff. The ones that stayed in the Navy, a couple of them got out or whatever. We've lost a couple. There was a first class, Cook was his last name. We called him Cookie. He had cancer. He passed away. There was a kid, Griffin, called him Griff. He developed something like cancer or whatever, and he passed away as well too. But I'm just going to tell you, the guys they were just great. And I'm fortunate enough to have gotten to be their division officer or whatever, right? And, kind of be associated with it. And I've ran into a couple of them. I was, again, Rams fan. Anytime the Rams play in Dallas, I fly out to Dallas and watch them, because one of my best friends as an A school instructor is a season ticket holder, Dallas fan. And I go meet him and we go see the football games. And I ran into one of those A-gangers in the bar we were hanging out in Dallas, because he lives out there, But
it's hard to explain, like in the surface fleet, you have the fraternization rules,
right?
And certainly we're supposed to observe them in the submarine fleet, but it's hard to explain to people that we're a little bit closer.
It's just because so much different.
Yeah, it's just different.
You just, you live and breathe and you sleep. You don't have. You got officer staterooms and stuff, but it's through a bulkhead from the enlisted guys. It's not like you're on your own level and this, that, and the other, and you have to be close knit with that crew, because you have to, on a submarine, you have to trust that while you're sleeping, whoever's on watch can save the ship in a casualty, or at least save it long enough for the experts to get back to help.
Which goes to the point of what the Dolphin qualification program really is for, which is why it's a shame when they give them away in those midship ops. Just if any captains listening, maybe it might help out.
I think in later years they changed the policy and wouldn't allow it anymore. Right? They prevented. They got to the point where they wouldn't do it. But and then the last 6 months I was there, I was the communications officer, and by that point you're qualified submarines. So I got my gold Dolphins December 7th of 2000. Basically 10 years.
You're on path for an engineer tour or even executive officer at this point.
Right. So you do your junior officer tour, you go to shore tour, that kind of thing. You go back through as a department head. So I transferred from Wyoming. So I can't talk about Wyoming without talking about Jeff Hughes. Jeff was the then commander who made full bird. He was my CO for Patrol 10, 12, 14, and 16 before I was there. And we transferred together. He went to be the CO of the prototype unit in Boston Spa, and I transferred there to be basically a shift engineer. So back in that time, they had trouble getting officers to agree to go to prototype because it's rotating shift work, right? and be an instructor. So if you volunteered to go to prototype as an instructor, they guaranteed that you had up to either an 18 or a 24-month follow-on shore tour. So you're there for 2 years at prototype. Depending on where your class window was to go to department head school, you got up to 24 more months at whatever you wanted to do, right? So that they didn't have to force people to prototype. So you jump back to me getting a criminal justice degree. What can you do once you retire at 30-something years old with a political science degree that'll make you any kind of money? Not a lot, right? So I volunteered to go to prototype to be an instructor for 2 years. We already talked about how I love being an instructor anyway, because I wanted and got to go to grad school at Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey and got my financial management MBA. So volunteered to prototype, went there as an instructor for 2 years, had an absolute blast up there. That's where I got into competitive powerlifting and stuff for the first time, in my life or whatever. And
still exercising this time, huh?
Yeah, oh yeah, still going. So I got a prototype when I took over my crew. So you get there and you take over as a.
Behind me is a picture of Florida. I should have a picture of Wyoming, but for those who don't know, that's what a Trident submarine looks like.
Right.
It's just that one's been converted to a tomahawk shooter.
Hey, real quick, the picture that I sent you that has the Wyoming captain, the one that's down right there, third one over on the not the guy, not the enlist, not that one right there. Show that one real quick.
The guy with the black uniform?
Correct.
Let's pull him up.
So, real quick, okay. Patrol 16 for Wyoming was post 9/11. So, on 9/11, I was in what's called P&EO school, prospective nuclear engineer. So, as an officer, after you qualify forward and, you do you're already qualified, you got your dolphins, you now have to go to engineer school to get certified as an engineer. Go to naval reactors, get interviewed, you do all this testing and stuff like that. The officer right there that's in the white, that is Jeff Hughes. That's probably the best CO I've ever worked for. Okay. Right. He was the kind of guy, he had a yellow sticky that stuck on his desk in his stateroom, and it basically said, "Who have you asked about their day?" Those kind of things, right? And he would walk around and he would talk to everybody on the ship and ask them how they were and about their family. He know this and know that and that kind of thing. Well, anyway, so post 9/11, if you look, so you see the captain. To his left is Rich Buhay. He is one of the A gangers I was talking about. Okay. So that is a ceremony that is at Squad 288 and Hazmat 1 in New York City. So that squad lost 19 people during 9/11. Okay. Wow. So we did Patrol 16 and dedicated it to Squad 288 Hazmat 1. The firehouse sent us a bunch of the helmets from the guys that had passed away.
No way.
9/11.
What did you guys do with those helmets?
The helmets stayed on top of the ballast control panel. Uh-huh. We had the main command passageway had a biography of everybody that had passed away. The crew got to know everybody. We got a bunch of Squad 288 Hazmat 1 ball caps. That's what we wore underway instead of command ball caps and stuff like that. If you pull up that picture, that's me in the Ssell with the flag back behind me.
Yeah.
That one right there.
Gotcha.
So you see the Squad 288 hat that I have on. There it is. So the guy in the back by the flag, that's Rich Buhay. He's from New York City. We That was the ceremony. So I was driving that day. We were on the surface. We raised 19 flags on the flagstaff, brought them down, folded them up, and in that ceremony from the previous picture, the captain went and presented a flag flown off Wyoming to each of the 19 families. Right. So,
Oh wow. Yeah.
so we did a big thing. We got brow banner pictures where we had a big, the brow banner was the big banners from the squad and that kind of stuff. So, um, a great relationship developed between the Wyoming and that firehouse there in New York City. And that's Ryan Regal in the forefront. He was my lookout that day, and Richie Hay was up there doing the flags, and we were raising the flags and stuff. And if you happen to look in real close, I know nobody at home can see it, but in my sunglasses, you see Rob Nichols, who was an electronic Ford
Yeah,
Ford ET. You can see him in
so
my
if you go on
glasses.
Facebook for the intro for the show, you'll be able to see this. Yeah, if
That's
you look
right.
at the picture.
So Nichols is in my sunglasses or whatever.
Yeah.
So that was the beauty. I tell you that I don't think there's a better thing. There might be one thing in the Navy that's better than being in the bridge of a submarine on the surface, sunset, sunrise, driving the submarine,
Watching the
and that might
dolphins jump up
be
front.
right. Dolphins in the bow wave and stuff. And if it's better, it might be a pilot. And I'll tell you a story. We were coming out of Kings Bay, and when you leave the East Coast for submarines, you got to drive 10 or 12
Yeah, how'd you
hours
like
east.
navigating into that channel that old Jimmy Carter built that base back in there for you?
Oh yeah, it was challenging and very narrow,
Yeah,
but
you got it in and out of there, huh?
yeah. But so you had to drive east for like 10 hours to get past the continental shelf to submerge and
Before you could
stuff.
dive, yeah.
Right, and so I was officer of the deck one time, and we're driving due east, and we're heading out to sea, and it's just me and my lookout, and all of a sudden I hear this roar, and I'm like, oh my god! And I look to starboard, and Jacksonville, Florida had a Navy airport training. They train pilots there.
Right.
Well, there was one of the two-seater training jets. This pilot had basically run us down from behind, was about 50 feet off the water. So he is like eye level with me in the sail. And when he gets right beside us, the roar that I hear is him. He turns that airplane on its nose, or not on its nose, on its afterburner. He just stands it up just like that, looks over at me, waves, and then turns right in front of me and then shoots back inland down the other side of the boat. And I'm like, that happened to be the coolest thing you could ever
There
see.
might be
You're in the sail
pilots out
already.
there saying that's no way that could happen because they're really big on safety now. What
Okay.
year was that?
That would have been around 2002.
Yeah, maybe you can get
The
away with that now, but yeah, they're saying like in Top Gun, like because there are a lot of computer graphics, and you got
oh,
real
yeah.
F-18 pilots going, "Oh, there's no they too close together. There's no way that could happen." So you got a guy buzzing a submarine feet away.
He was maybe 40 yards to my starboard, 50 feet off the water, and standing the airplane
And
up just like
smiling and
that.
waving.
And waving at him. I'm telling you, he was straight up Maverick the whole time over
Oh,
there, dude. I'm
that's a
telling
great
you.
story.
You had rules, you had to call the captain if you were getting like approached by either airplanes
Mm.
or surface warships and stuff like that. And I'm like, I call down, I get the captain on the phone. I'm like, Captain, you're not going to believe this one.
Yeah, that had to get reported, I imagine. Yeah, somebody had to.
The captain just laughed. I told him. He
Oh,
just kind of laughed.
he just laughed. It didn't even go out in a report or anything,
Well,
bro.
by
Yeah,
the time I got him on the phone, the guy's already back
yeah,
in
he's
Jacksonville.
gone. Yeah, he's
He's
already
like,
landed.
yeah.
So
So,
we're kind of running out of time here, but let's move on to Greenville real quick. It
okay,
looks like so that's your department head tour. You become the navigator,
correct.
and for people that don't know, the USS Greenville was the one that was in the accident with
Human
the
Maroon.
the Maru, the school ship, and yeah, I guess you got there what a few years after that, or
That was 2002. I got there in around June of '06. from the Ahimie Maru in 2002, they had a surface collision with a non-Navy ship. They had a grounding incident, and then they hit a Navy surface ship. If you looked at the command plaque on the passageway, it was the shape of Tennessee, and it had each little CO's thing. There were 3 COs within about a 7-month window, 7 to 8 month kind of thing. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, they
I
had
got
a
there.
bad run, huh?
Oh God, I got there. I got there 2 years after all of the accidents, and the morale was horrible. I
Yeah,
mean,
well, that was my next question. Wouldn't that make you nervous as a navigator?
well, first of all, I went through department head school as a weapons officer, and the day before we graduated, they called me in the office and said, "Hey, you're going to Greenville to be the navigator."
Oh, you're like,
And
oh no.
I hadn't done any navigation prep other than what little bit they made you do for everybody.
Uh-huh.
Um, so yeah, so you go to Greenville, and it's like, so nervous. I hadn't wanted to be a navigator to begin with, but I showed up in June of '06, took over as navigator. Uh, Greenville was a
War's underway,
Greenville.
by the way, by this, well underway. And
What's that?
The war is well underway by this
Oh yeah.
time. And Greenville's that's an approved class, Los Angeles.
It was a 688I, which means it was the improved. Yes, what you
Improved.
said.
Okay.
It was an improved. So, you didn't have the fair water planes anymore. You had bow planes, and um,
Yeah.
they changed the vertical tomahawk stuff and those kind of things for the improved class, right? So, but Greenville and Charlotte, both out of Hawaii, were ASDS. So that was the Advanced Seal Delivery System. That was a miniature submarine that was piloted by, you had a post department head submariner officer that was attached to the SEAL unit. Him and a 04 SEAL were the pilots. They drove it. So it's basically, if anybody out there knows the old DSRV programs.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. There was a kind of like the DSRV.
Right,
I've
right.
never seen one. I have to look that up after this. Yeah.
It was a mini submarine, and it would swim, and battery operated. It would sit down over the engine room hatch, and it would, once it did a water seal, pump the water off, you could open the hatches, you climb in and out. It was it carried seals, and it dispersed seals where seals were going, and it
We're in
was
the
a
Middle East, and this is lateral warfare at this time, so that's probably
right.
why we needed that type of capability, huh?
Right. And it was a test platform. So it had been built. Lockheed Martin built it. The controls were basically cockpit controls from airplanes. They had joysticks just like the airplanes, is how they kind of steered it and drove it and stuff. And so, funny story, when I got picked up for an enlisted commissioning program, you had to go to a 7-week school in Rhode Island to learn how to be an officer, right? Knife and fork school.
Oh, didn't think about that. Yeah, everybody has to go
Right.
there.
So,
Yeah.
so you went there. You got issued all your officer uniforms and stuff.
Right.
You learned the knife and fork school stuff, and you also had to get your freshman and sophomore ROTC classes, right? Because you were expected to come into school with prior credit, but you didn't have freshman and sophomore, ROTC courses done. So you got them while you were there. Well, there was a guy there. His name was Rob Byford, and Rob was a submarine yeoman.
Right.
Had gotten picked up for the ECP the same year I did. Met him up at this school, and Rob was diehard. I'm going to be a SEAL. I'm going to be a SEAL, and without belaboring it, taking a lot of time, he got us in trouble when we go out to bars in town while we were up there, because he would basically tell the whole bar that we were all SEALs. Now Rob was my size. We had a dude that was like 6'4", that was a surface. we had some big guys, and we'd all hang out. And so Rob was running around telling everybody we were a SEAL platoon and we were going to tear the whole place down.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so anyway, so I didn't ever see Rob again. That's summer of '95. I get to Greenville in '06. The first operation that we do with the ASDS unit and the SEALs, they come over in one of their little inflatable ribs from their Ford Island command, and you get 2 boats full of SEALs, and they all come down to the wardroom, and we're getting ready to do this brief. And I'm sitting there looking over all the stuff they sent us, and I hear this voice walk in. It's like he basically said something about one of my tattoos or whatever, and I'm like, how in the world does this person know this? And I look up, and it's Rob Byford. 11 years later, he's a lieutenant commander SEAL, and Rob was the first officer in Afghanistan for the SEALs. Great career for him. Yeah. We started doing workups for deployment and all the ASDS stuff. Went on deployment in November of '06 through May of '07. Thought we were going to do a real life ASDS op. We did some training with them. We thought we were going to take them on a mission.
On a real thing.
We were starting to do the workups for it. It got canceled. ASDS got taken back to Hawaii, and that's when they had the battery explosion that basically one of the lithium batteries that they used exploded and blew a big hole in the hull. They were at the final decision point in that program.
Was this on the mini sub or the Greenville?
That's the mini sub.
The mini sub. So
right, and because it damaged the hull, they were at the final point of selecting that program to become active and fund building more and going forward, and they basically scrapped the whole program.
Right.
And
makes you wonder if they had the same lithium batteries that was in the Lockheed. That's Boeing Dreamliner.
Right.
Could have been the same builder, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because they hadn't been really perfected at that point yet.
No, they hadn't. And I know we probably won't have time really to talk much about it, but my second book, which is Lethal Intentions, that I have right there.
See that real good. Thank you for showing.
Is Lethal Intentions is more of a traditional Tom Clancy type Hunt for Red October-ish book, and it's based on the USS Greenville taking. The premise of it is that some ex-Navy SEALs retire, get private funding, they build their own ASDS program and lease it back to the Navy to do missions with. And so in the book, Greenville takes this new ASDS platform on a mission to North Korea, kind of thing, basically. And then it goes through.
They do it like after they've gotten out of the Navy, they offer their services to do it.
Right, so they get private funding and they start their own company,
like
and they become
big.
Right, kind of like So they and so they use the platform, and we go into we send guys into North Korea to take care of some stuff, atypical SEAL inland type stuff or whatever, right?
Yeah,
it's all fictional.
Yeah, it's all well. I'm glad you brought that up, because you're right. We're getting time to the close and kind of time to the part of really don't want to talk about. But I mean, you at some time in your career you got divorced, obviously, and you got remarried to your current wife, Tracy, and tragically, and just 2018, which is not that long ago.
Right. No.
Was he riding as a passenger?
Colby went. Colby loved to work. He had his best friend owned their family owned chicken houses, and Colby would go work on the farm with them a good bit and that kind of thing. And they'd come to us on a Wednesday, said that they were going to be shorthanded on the farm that weekend. Could Colby spend the night, Friday and Saturday night, work on the farm Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to help them out? And so we Tracy and I, Tracy, we basically agreed that he could spend a night and stay the 2 nights and work. And he was having some school work issues, and so we had a big discussion with him about. He took a math test on that Friday and said, "Hey, Monday when we're back and you get your grades, if your grades you don't do well on this test, then you won't get the opportunity to go do this whole weekend thing again because you need to get your school grades and stuff up." But anyway, so Friday night they'd gone to a basketball game there at the high school. We saw him Friday night. Saturday, he talked to his mom. Well, the parents. There are people who believe it's okay to let their kids drink around them if they're not going anywhere to drive and this, that, and the other. The parents didn't tell us because they knew we wouldn't have let Colby stay. They got a hotel room that Saturday night. So it was February the 11th. So it's a Saturday right before Valentine's Day. So they went and got a hotel room, let their boys have a party on the farm. Their oldest son was 21. He bought alcohol. Other people brought alcohol. And so they were on the farm drinking. And the boy that Colby was riding with, Evan, was 17. Colby was 16. Evan was BAC was 0.18, so well over the limit. At some point, Colby, two things Colby wanted to do in his life. He wanted to be an electrical lineman like his dad. His dad's been one over 20 years. And he wanted a big, giant diesel truck, big tires, blowing black smoke. They call it rolling coal or whatever. But well, Evan had a big diesel truck. And at some point in that night, we were told they decided to go on a joyride or they were taking somebody home or something. And they went for a ride. And around 2:15 in the morning, they were coming back to the farm where the party was. Raining, it's dark. He's speeding, 0.18 BAC, had other things in his system too. Colby's been drinking too, so you make bad decisions. But Colby went riding with him. Topped the hill right before the turn into the farm, ran off the road. And when you're young and inexperienced, you jerk the wheel back on the road.
Exactly.
Jerked the wheel, shot across the road, went up into the trees on the left side. There was a little sapling that he hit on the driver's side of the truck, and it folded under the truck. And so it kicked the truck sideways, and Colby, it basically put Colby head first into a tree, big tree, and killed him instantly. They were at the farm. All the kids at the farm had to run down there. They were in the truck. Evan, the driver, was kind of trapped in the dash, kind of pinning his legs a little bit. But so all these kids are trying to rip the dash out to get Evan out. There's a couple of them that are in the back seat of the truck with, Colby's dead. And the oldest son, the one that his girlfriend, she said she was in the truck holding Evan's hand and trying to wake Colby up, not wanting to be dead, but they think he died instantly. So my first book, I had written my first book at some point in like 2016, and when you get 50 or so rejection letters from agents trying to do traditional publishing, you kind of lose heart and get frustrated. And so I hadn't touched the book. Well, within a month of Colby dying, I basically decided that, hey, if I get this book and I go through the process of self-publishing, if I sell books, that kind of thing, then I'll use all the royalty money that I get back out off those sales to help fund the scholarship. So I had previously created a nonprofit that was set up to raise money to do like military charity stuff. So we do motorcycle rides and we donate money to wounded warriors and other groups that help soldiers and stuff.
And
military
how often is the scholarship given out that is done through Colby?
So because Colby wanted to be a lineman, we set up and we converted that original charity into the Colby Haithcock Memorial Scholarship Fund. We started out at Forsyth Technical, which is in above Winston-Salem, just north of Winston-Salem. And they have, they do 5, at the time they were doing 5, now they only do 4 classes of lineman a year. It's a $700 and something program. Through discussions with the school, we donate $2,000 a year there. So we do 4 $500 scholarships that pays back the student that wins it most of the money they put into it to go through the program. And the principle was that we're trying to help somebody live Colby's dream, okay? Because that's what he wanted to be. And before this COVID stuff hit, I would drive up there and go to all the graduations and tell the story, and you make everybody cry and that kind of stuff. But you really hammer them with the fact that, hey, you kids are, yeah, I know, dude, I know. And that's why you don't see Tracy in here. She can't. 2 years later, she just can't talk about it.
We were gonna invite Tracy on, but I don't blame her for not coming on either.
Yeah, she'll come when if we do part 2 or whatever, she'll come in and say hi and stuff, and we'll talk some more about what we do. But we moved out to the beach a year ago to kind of get away from that area and where it happened and stuff. And she's got a daughter that's 2 years younger than Colby that hasn't talked to her since the funeral, because she believes her mom's by letting him stay there, she blames her for Colby's death because she's the one that let him spend the night, So she hadn't talked to her. She lost both her kids that night at this point, until Riley comes back to her. Yeah. So
talking to you.
Yeah. So we moved out here, and now, so I found out that Cape Fear Community College up near Wilmington, they have a lineman program. So we set up the same thing there. So we do another $2,000 there. We do $1,000 to a tutorial, after school tutorial program for like elementary school, like age K through like third grade or something like that, because they presented info at church one time, and their improvement scores for all of their students are drastically better than what the schools are putting out. So they're helping these kids. And so we donate $1,000 to them. And then this past school year, we started, it would have been his graduation year, 2020. So we gave away a $1,000 scholarship that we'll do every year there. So we've committed $6,000 a year to those charities, or to those schools for those programs, right. To try to raise awareness for teenage drinking and driving.
Kids don't realize how finite life can be. Yeah, you don't realize it till you get older, unfortunately.
Exactly, and not only was her life and her ex's life and those families and our life together ruined, but the driver Evan is in prison for 5 years. I mean, in the state of North Carolina, it's called felony death by motor vehicle. Now here it's felony death by motor vehicle because of the DUI part. Yeah,
so he's to deal with that for the rest of his life, obviously.
Right.
What a horrible tragedy.
A felon.
Wow.
That's why I polished that book off and updated it to reflect 2018 instead of 2016 and all the dates. And I use military date time groups and stuff like that to keep it all, military and stuff. Right. And the first book is called Keep Silent Service.
Can you hold up both books real quick?
Yep. So there's Keep Silent Service. I can't see how much of the screen you can, or the cover.
I can see it pretty well. Yeah, that was pretty good.
And then the second book again is Lethal Intentions.
They are both. Right there you go. That's perfect. And again, after this video is done, both those books are going to be in the link below. How to get a hold of those.
And so Keep Silent Service, the premise is that it's Trident based, and it's on the Wyoming because my boat. But the premise is that the president, in today's world of interconnectivity across the world with Facebook and stuff like that he's worried that if he gave the order to launch nuclear weapons, that a ship might not carry the order out because, somebody might not want to destroy, their gaming buddy that lives in, you pick a country kind of thing, right? So if anybody's been attached to a command, that if you have riders on, in other words, non-command members, they're there monitoring you, they're there looking for something. So, you wear your best uniforms and that kind of stuff, and you act different than you would if you were underway.
Yeah.
So, you alluded to females on submarines, a while back. So in the book, the lead character, basically the president finds a female psychologist who's young, recently certified psychologist, presents her with the idea of joining the Navy, going through all the stuff that I did to become a nuclear junior officer and get qualified. And so that by the time she's on Wyoming and qualified as a officer of the deck and gets her dolphins, no one will know she's really a psychologist that's been doing all these sleep deprivation studies and this, that, and the other. And then the command doesn't know that they traded, when they did a routine missile trade out, they put missiles on that didn't have real warheads. And the command thinks they're getting real launch orders when all along only her and the captain know that it's
fake one.
That it's a test.
That sounds like an interesting book.
Yeah.
I was just looking up something real quick. Have you had to deal with females on any of your commands? I mean, I don't want to get into that discussion right now. Maybe part 2 we can talk about that. I was just wondering.
Right. Prototypes and stuff were all integrated. When I was on Wyoming, obviously Greenville at that time didn't have them yet. If anybody, if you stay up on it, the Wyoming again had the issue of once they put the first few female officers on board, that's the boat that the enlisted guy put a camera in the outboard of their head and took pictures of them taken to one.
Yeah.
Right.
I have an opinion because I was on the Canopus for 2 years.
Right.
And I saw the craziness with captain's mast every other week. And it's not because females are not capable of doing a job. They're certainly capable of doing a job. It's we have a different society than other navies do.
Right.
They grow up differently. They're not, well, for lack of a better word, they don't mind being naked around each other. It doesn't matter because it's just different society. And unfortunately, but maybe part 2 we can talk more about that. And,
Okay.
I want to mention I recently had a female submariner, Kaylee Barron, qualified, and she's an astronaut, along with Superman Johnny Kim, Navy SEAL, physician.
That's right.
The only thing he missed, he didn't get his submarine dolphins.
Well, I tell you, hey, when you get a chance, look up. Bowen is his last name. I think his first name.
I've talked to him by email. I think he sent me an email from the space station when I was running the Submarine.
Submariner. He was a JO on Parchy when I was there.
Yeah, amazing guy.
Narcoleptic. He couldn't stay awake. He would sit and fall asleep in the EOW chair behind me because I was sitting on. Oh yeah, I would sit in the electric plant. He would fall asleep, and on the old 637 boats, you had the 3 operators, and you had a curtain over to the on the other side of the throttle.
He's gonna come after you when he sees this broadcast, by the way.
Probably, but he knows it's true though. But he would fall asleep all the time, and literally our watch section, we would just let him sleep as long as he didn't have to do anything. We just because you're just running around operating steady state. As long as nothing, I'd nudge him, I'd, elbow him on the knee or whatever and kind of bring him awake if somebody came in the door over there on the other side and stuff like that. But it's like, once I found out he became an astronaut, I'm like, oh my God. It's like,
how's that happen?
Exactly.
He ended up being their master mechanic for building the space station. He was on a backup crew for the shuttle and he went up there, I don't think he did the most spacewalks, but he certainly did a lot. And can you falling asleep while you're doing a spacewalk? I'm just
well,
gonna
it
take a
had.
nap here in Houston.
That's right. It had to be the fact that on submarines, and especially as junior officers
Right.
and this, that, and the other, you just never got any sleep. Submarine life is sleep deprivation at its
It
finest,
sure is, yeah.
and it had to be it. After that, he had to have spent time and had
Yeah.
plenty of rest and never had to worry about it. But I swear to you, he could not stay awake ever. Training, you name it, he was always falling asleep. It was funny, but it's funny related story
That's a
to
good
you
story.
bringing
Well,
up
the
the
story
space
was is
shuttle
he
stuff.
had a slot to become a Virginia class submarine captain or become an astronaut, is what I heard.
Right?
And
Yeah,
he chose the astronaut program. Huh.
I can't blame him. It's
Yeah.
awesome. It really is.
Well, we're just a little bit over 2 hours there, Dave. I appreciate you having on. Um, this is Lieutenant Commander David Anderson once again. We had a great discussion. I think we covered a lot of your career. Definitely inviting you back for part 2 if you'd like to come back. And
I'd love to.
too. But other than that, we're going to end this right now. And this is Eric Ryle with TheSubVet.com. Thank you, everyone, for viewing. I hope you enjoy this broadcast. It's 13 green and go, and have a fine Navy day.